We have to know ourselves. We have to really feel ourselves in order to make choices in our lives, whether that's for food or activities or even environments that are truly nourishing for us.
Hi, it's James here from Food Matters, and today I'm here with Chara Caruthers, and we are going to be talking about a living science, an ancient science, an Eastern approach to health and well-being, and it's called Ayurveda. We're going to dive into this topic, but keep it as practical as possible, because the times that I've come across this information, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So we're going to dive straight into a lot of practical application here. Chara is a senior yoga teacher, a yoga therapist, and an Ayurvedic consultant with a clear and powerful message of know yourself and love yourself. You can find out more about her at blissbodyandsoul.com. Chara, how are you today?
I'm great, James. I'm really good, and it's good to be here chatting with you.
I'm excited to introduce the Food Matters community a little bit more to Ayurveda. I feel like in the West, we've rushed towards so many modern approaches to diet, and we're all the latest superfoods and the latest information, and yet there's thousands of year-old traditions in the East, like traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, and they have this really similar understanding of the body in terms of balancing not only the material, mechanical components of health, but also the energetic components of health. Can you sort of summarize for me, in your experience, what is Ayurveda? What is its origins and its implications for health?
So Ayurveda is, as you've touched on, it's an ancient body of wisdom. I often say that it's an ancient system of health and healing that recognizes the importance or the deep value, something that we're really beginning to come to in our modern kind of way of looking at things, the deep value of harmonizing what's happening inside of us with what's going on outside of us. So its origins are, it's got the same foundation as yoga. Sometimes it's considered the sister science of yoga. And so, in fact, most of the folks who are finding out about Ayurveda these days are finding out in one of two ways, either through their yoga practice. So maybe a teacher mentions something or somebody runs a workshop or something like that, or through having some sort of a health issue themselves and seeking to look at alternative, what you might consider alternative therapies for help with that. And that kind of points to what I might consider to be like the two main areas that Ayurveda focuses on, one of which is prevention, and that's Ayurveda's biggest area of focus, and also something we're starting to recognize is far more important these days. And the other is healing. And so Ayurveda does have a healing arm that has practices and, ways of approaching healing of various types of diseases, but mostly we're looking at the prevention side.
Beautiful, amazing. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny at all. It's actually very interesting because, I remember interviewing Charlotte Gerson a number of years ago, and her father, Dr. Max Gerson, was a big pioneer in natural healing in terms of pushing forward just new ideas into the medical fraternity that actually, hey, maybe detoxification, maybe higher nutrients and fresher foods can help heal the body. And it was a radical proposition, and actually still is today, funnily enough. But she said something really interesting, that prevention and cure are somewhat the same thing. It's really, they speak to the same core message, because if something can prevent an illness, it also has the power to help treat illness. Does Ayurveda see this the same way? And how does Ayurveda approach this concept of imbalances in the body? Because I've been taught about them in terms of you have nutrient deficiencies or you're over-toxic, but Ayurveda has a little bit of a different way of thinking about imbalances, right? Tell me about this.
Yeah, so it connected to this idea that you're talking about, this value and importance of prevention. Ayurveda wants us to understand that any kinds of disease, any kind of illness that we're really feeling, it has an origin somewhere. It starts somewhere. And if you look way, way back, if you focus way, way back to that upset tummy you had from eating that pizza, or to that off kind of not so great way that you felt after having that tough conversation with somebody, or that discomfort you felt sitting out in the cold, all of those little things are what we call the seeds of disease. all of those little things stack one on top of each other to become potentially to become some kind of an illness. And so in Ayurveda, an imbalance can be as simple as that to as complex as, IBS or, or cancer even, or any kind of major disease and illness that we're experiencing. And so what that really means is that there's a pretty long journey for most folks between, having a little digestive upset and having IBS or, ulcerative colitis or whatever the things that we're challenged with, even anxiety or depression, etc. There's a long journey there. And along that spectrum, along that journey, we have a lot of opportunities to rebalance ourselves in order to offset that potential incredible challenge for us, physical, mental, etc. So imbalance it's as long a spectrum from something very, very simple to something that's can be quite challenging within Ayurveda.
I love that, just that term, that in a way a disease or an external or even an internal manifestation of a problem such as IBS or digestive issues is seen as an imbalance. So then Ayurvedics sort of the role of Ayurveda as a system or a science is to bring the body back to balance, right? So it just sees, oh, you're out of balance. Okay, no problems. Let's bring you back to balance. But in the West, we see it as, well, you have a chronic illness, and that's that, and let's manage the symptoms. Whereas Ayurveda is like, well, there's something out of balance here. How do we get to that root cause of realigning? So that's very beautiful. I love that idea. What are some of the? I mean, maybe we can touch on this a little bit. How talk to me about this, but also how do we categorize different types of imbalances in the body from an Ayurvedic perspective?
Well, imbalances in Ayurveda are categorized in many different ways. The simplest way of looking at it is what Ayurveda kind of wants us to do. Is it wants us to try to understand that every experience that we have has some quality to it, right? It may be a hot quality. Now, when you think about the fact that Ayurveda is more than 5,000 years old, we didn't have the same kind of tools that we have for analysis and even for naming things that we did back then. And so a lot of what came out of that time was relative to what we could perceive, what we could understand. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the ways that we categorize things, very similar to Chinese medicine, are in terms of qualities that we can understand and experience. So things like hot or cold or light or heavy or wet or dry. And there's an understanding with that if we understand that something's hot, like let's say it's inflammation or it's anger or it's hypertension, something that you might even feel a sense of heat within your body, we can create balance by adding something that is its opposite, like something that's cool or cold. So that might be cooling foods or cooling types of environments, maybe environments that aren't so highly, tense or stressed, or cooling herbs, or even taking on a more cooling sense within ourselves, within the way that we think and the way that we hold the world. And so typically when we're looking at imbalances in an Ayurvedic through an Ayurvedic lens, we're seeing something that's hot or something that's heavy or light or whatever it might be.
Amazing.
And I feel like that's empowering personally, because for me, knowing that I'm dealing with constipation and that's dry, I know I need some more liquid. I need to add some more oil or some more water or some more flow in my life. So that's, those are, in that way, Ayurveda really empowers us to identify what's happening within us and then to heal ourselves. I
love that. And it is so practical. And I know that Ayurveda uses a lot of different sort of diagnoses tools as well. There's like pulse, they feel the pulse, and then there's also breath, and then they're trying to analyze where there might be imbalances in the body. Like you say, it's similar a little bit to traditional Chinese medicine. They see things as damp or wet or dry, and they seek to balance them. And it feels like it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you've got a lot of heat or anger, eat cucumbers, be around water more, cool your body down. I mean, it's a beautiful idea. And like you said, constipation is definitely related to dehydration, because it's an inability for a stool to move through. So you're too too dry, so to make the body wet. Do you have any other practical examples of these? Because I find these fascinating. It seems it evades our common sense in the modern world, it seems. But I think finding these connections of using foods or spices to balance the body. Do you have any other examples of things that people might be suffering from and how that relates to a damp, dry, or hot or cold type Ayurvedic perspective?
Plenty. How much time you got? No, I'll throw a few more out there just to give people, just to get people kind of thinking. And one of the other things, just before I dive into that, one of the other things that Ayurveda invites us to do is to look outside the way that we normally might see these things, right? So normally we see something like, wet. We see it as we have a liquid, we think of wet as like a cup of water, or it's the sea, or something that's moist. But if we can expand the way that we think about things and the way that we see things to understand that we're talking about the whole of our experience, we might feel, and this wet was probably not the best choice, but there may be a wet emotion or a wet type of environment. Maybe wet is something that feels, for some people, that feels a little bit oppressive. And so maybe just being at home, even though the actual environment itself isn't humid, there's a wetness to it. And our bodies and our minds react and respond to it in those terms. So, for example, heaviness is an experience that we all experience at some point in the year, right? In our lives, we have moments where we feel a little bit challenged to be, to feel energized or to feel clear about things. So heaviness is an experience that we can feel in our bodies for sure, right? Sometimes you might eat too much food, and there's a heaviness there, and it may not even particularly correspond to actual weight, but it's a feeling that comes across in that way. So there's a spectrum, across our mental to physical, mental, emotional to physical, where we feel these things. And so we would offset that with some lightness. And so for folks who are feeling, or myself even, when I'm feeling a little bit down, I think, right, how can I infuse lightness here? Lightness might come from light, being outside and getting some sun on my skin. It may be choosing foods that are light. So rather than eating, a steak or eating something that feels a little bit heavy in terms of its quality itself, or even its quantity, like too much, it may be just having something quite light to eat, like some soup or something like that. Or if I'm tuning into myself and I know what lightness feels like in my body and where I get it. For example, for me, I have this incredible experience of lightness when I'm around friends and people that I love, and we're having great conversation and we're laughing and we're, all the rest of it. There's a lightness there. And so those times when I'm feeling heavy, I seek lightness in whatever form is maybe most easily available.
Amazing. I've experienced this personally as well. Like if I'm traveling a lot, I'm going on long flights and I'm running from place to place, I feel really light up in the clouds, and I always have this sense of wanting to ground and eat something heavy or cooked or and I'll go to like an Indian restaurant sometimes, have a big curry or a big chickpea curry or lentil curry, so just like bring me down, ground me, I don't feel like papaya and lime juice and a green juice. No, I'm like, land me. I need to get something. I need to feel in my body a little bit more. So I've definitely felt these sensations, and I love that you're encouraging people to sort of think a little bit more about it and try to even approach your day and your life in terms of how you're feeling and balancing that with your food. It's beautiful.
Yeah. A lot of it is just a matter of tuning in and getting a sense for beginning to learn ourselves. That's why my motto is know yourself, love yourself, because we have to know ourselves. We have to really feel ourselves in order to make choices in our lives, whether that's for food or activities or even environments, that are truly nourishing for us.
Beautiful. Amazing. And that's a very yogic philosophy as well. I mean, the whole idea of yoga is to go within. The whole idea of asana, pranayama, etc., Kriya takes us to meditation. And what is meditation? An inner journey, an inner feeling, an inner knowing, and that is Ayurveda. So it's not surprising that the two overlap so much. There's something here I wanted to speak about in terms of how Ayurveda approaches the categorization of tastes and food, because I think this is another practical way that people can start to explore this living science. Can you tell us about how you categorize food from an Ayurvedic perspective and flavors and tastes?
Sure. So this is coming perfectly after our discussion about these qualities, because if I asked you to tell me, or to give me a sense for something in your diet that's heavy, you might have a sense of that from the way that it makes you feel in your body. But there's lots of things that are in your diet that are heavy that you mightn't necessarily totally perceive. So in order to have a sense, you'll understand more as I talk. So in order to have a sense for how our food is impacting us, we have to go by what we can perceive, which is the taste of the food, right? So we know that Ayurveda categorizes food into 6 tastes, and every one of them you will recognize, and that's the beauty of it. So the first one is sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. And each of those tastes has a bunch of qualities associated with it. So I won't take you through all, but I'll just give you an example. So sweet, the sweet taste is cold, heavy, and wet. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because when you're choosing foods that are grounding, somehow you almost intuitively are choosing foods that are cool, or that are heavy. Perhaps wet has a heaviness to it. Like, you're almost always going to have something wet, aren't you, if you want something grounding? But the sweet taste it's a very nourishing taste. In Ayurveda, we say that it builds. It builds us. And so when you are feeling fatigued, or when you're feeling depleted, or in Ayurveda, we sort of say wasting is sort of considered it's a quality, or it's a state of being somebody who's really just, not necessarily not physically coping. You feel like you're kind of wasting away, like a lot of your vitality. Then it's likely that we'll be giving, or we would suggest that somebody have foods that are sweet. And when we think of sweet, we think candy, we think, pastries, all that other crap. No, food is actually most foods naturally have a sweet quality. So in Ayurveda, we may say have some rice, or have some, depending upon the experience they're having, we might say have some fruit, or even meat is actually considered sweet in Ayurveda. Most vegetables have a sweetness to them. And so, and so on and so on. So salty has a hot, light, and wet quality to it. And each of the different each of the different tastes have qualities to them. And those qualities give us a sense for how we use them relative to what we're experiencing in our lives, in moment to moment.
I think beautiful. And I think one of the next things I wanted to talk about was the incredible sort of, I guess, foresight and insight that Ayurveda had to integrate so many herbs and spices into its dietary sort of makeup and philosophy. And I've even heard statistics that the average Indian person consumes 1 teaspoon of turmeric per day. And, we're obviously learning so much about turmeric and ginger and all these incredible herbs and spices, and their capability to reduce inflammation and fight disease. And here we have a multi-thousand-year-old science that's integrated these spices and herbs directly into the food, so it's like eat thy medicine, right? Let medicine be thy food, and food be thy medicine. So can you speak a little bit to how Ayurveda sees herbs and spices, and some of the key herbs and spices that they use for healing and introducing into their recipes and into their day?
Sure. So Ayurveda, in a larger sense, Ayurveda sees everything that exists in the natural world to be in relationship with everything else. So we're always in relationship with the things around us. And as such, there are things in our world that contribute to our own ability to maintain a sense of vitality. And plants are one of them. And in particular, herbs and spices, they have particular qualities to them that, and not just qualities. So the ancient texts, they say that our yogic philosophy teaches us that plants have this life-giving essence, and when we combine that life-giving essence with our own, it helps to boost our life-giving essence. And so that's part of the reason why, that history. That's part of the reason why herbs and spices are such an important part of the Ayurvedic view or the Ayurvedic approach to living. It's because Ayurveda recognizes that as human beings, even just being in the world, even just interacting with each other, with the environments around us, it has a depleting effect. And so when we can make choices for certain things like herbs, which have this kind of little punch of goodness, when we can make choices for those things, they help to balance. Everything's about balancing. They help to balance the deleterious effect of just everyday living. And that is why, Ayurveda is kind of baked into the Indian way of living. Most Indians don't even realize they're practicing Ayurveda because they just have for their entire lives. That's the way their grandmothers were and their mothers were and that sort of stuff. But that's part of the reason why Ayurveda recommends that we engage with herbs and we take herbs, and they serve all kinds of purposes. And primarily, herbs serve the purpose of helping us to digest. Because digestion is a really important thing. And so for the most part, most herbs or spices in Ayurveda are focused around increasing our ability or our capacity to digest physically, which expands to our capacity to digest mentally and emotionally and all the rest of it. And so herbs like you've mentioned, like turmeric, like ginger, herbs like cinnamon, which is one of my favorites, fennel, cumin seeds, coriander seeds. These things are all very powerful digestive herbs, and they're going to be built into most Indian foods that you eat. But our Western diet came up without the benefit of having those spices around, and so our Western diets are typically they are devoid of those wonderful herbs, which also add a lot of flavor to things. And so for Westerners, there's this process of having to build those things back into our lives and our diets by making the choice to use them and finding ways to cook with them that serve our palate. Because I know most people are like, I don't like Indian food. I don't want to eat Indian food all the time. So we do have to kind of find a way to incorporate them into our diet that serves us or that, pleases the palate, because that's important.
Wonderful, amazing. And it's incredible that there is this overlap, I think, with yoga and Ayurveda, and then also the current state of the modern world where we're so challenged from a digestive perspective. And, in practicing, a lot more yoga than I have in the last year than I have in the last, 10 years or so, I've been increasing my practice and understanding. There's this huge focus on the Rudra, the Rudrani, or they call it all these different names in different cultures, this center of power in the stomach and the gut area here. And to be able to build power there from an energetic perspective through yoga, and to be able to build power there from a digestive perspective, to have a strong, powerful digestion gives you, from a nutrition and health perspective, the ability to fight off disease, because we know that 60% of our immune system resides in the gut. So supporting gut health supports our immune system. So that's super critical. But then yoga talks a lot about digesting emotions as well, which is what you said. If your digestion is poor and you don't have good digestive strength and energy in that area of your body, you're less able to handle the emotional challenges that come your way. So I love how this science is, like you say, it's a mind-body science. So could we dive a little bit deeper into some of the different ways Ayurveda approaches supporting digestion? I know you named some of those herbs. Maybe you want to talk about ways that you introduce those herbs into your diet on a daily basis, or any specifics around some key herbs or spices that you think are absolutely most critical in the ways that you use them on a daily basis for improving digestion and gut health.
Sure. So just to kind of span out for a minute, I think it's important to understand the Ayurvedic and maybe yogic concept of food. And so food, from an Ayurvedic standpoint, we're kind of just a big ball of senses, right? We've got sight and sound and all sorts of stuff. So from an Ayurvedic point of view, food is just about anything that we're consuming, that we're processing. So that's things that we hear, things that we see, taste, all of it. And so when we think about what we come into contact with on a daily basis, there's a lot for the mind and body complex to deal with. And in order to, what we actually need to be doing is we need to be processing all of this stuff. We need to extract the good stuff, extract the nutrients, whether that's in the actual food we eat or whether that's in the information that we're hearing. And then we need to be able to let go of anything that ain't serving us, right? And not let that stuff gather in our mind and body. And so just understanding first and foremost that we are constantly consuming gives us a sense for how for the potential for our digestive system, physical, mental, emotional, as we've talked about, to be overwhelmed or to be compromised. And so anything that we do on any of those levels is going to, in the Ayurvedic view, is going to affect all the others. So if you're listening to too much radio or you're listening to too much news or whatever it is, decreasing the consumption is really important, whether that's consuming food or whether that's consuming anything else. That's really, really key. Decreasing it. And then what about the quality of the stuff that you're taking in? So if we're just talking about food, tuning into how you feel, ensuring that you're not overwhelming your digestive system. We often liken digestive system to a fire. So if you can imagine at certain times of the day, if you're tuning into how your belly feels, at certain times of the day, you're ravenous, right? And maybe the middle of the day, or it might just be depending upon what you do. And so tuning into that and making sure that when your fire is low, that you're not overwhelming it with too much with too much food or too much cold food. So tuning into that feeling, what that feels like. And then for most of us, we're moving through our days experiencing something that we call, in Ayurveda, that we call Manda Agni or Vishama Agni. And this means, Agni is the word that we use for digestive fire. And this basically means that our fire is low, and that might be related to how much stuff we're dealing with on all levels, or our fire is variable. And so we can use things like herbs, and I'll talk about those. We can use things like herbs to offset that variability, right? To kind of regulate it. And that's what we're really looking to do. We want a fire that's burning nice at a nice even pace. Like, you can imagine how annoying it is to try to cook on a fire that's like, or it's like really, really low, or it's up and down all the time. It's just, it doesn't work. And your body, the rest of your body is trying to compensate in some way for that. So herbs are a really easy way for us to regulate that fire. I talked about some of the herbs. My favorite herbs out of all those that I talked about, just because they're easy to take and you can take it at just about anything for helping to regulate the digestive fire, ginger. So ginger, you can take, you can eat it. You could just eat it if you're that way inclined. You could just eat a piece of ginger. Like if you know that you're about to have a meal and you feel as though your body feels a little bit heavy or feels just a little bit like you might need a little bit of a boost, you can maybe grate a little piece of ginger or chew a little piece of ginger, and you will almost immediately feel the effects of that. If you want to be proactive, in other words, you've just woken up and you've got a lot on today. You don't have a lot of time to, focus on your meals and how you want to do them, but you want to make sure that you're priming, what we call priming your fire. You might have a warm drink with a bit of ginger in it. And that ginger is like a fuel that will keep or like a little bit of kerosene maybe, that will keep that fire kind of on a slow and low burn. And then you can tune in the rest of your day and not have too much food or not eat foods that are going to mess with that beautifully regulated fire that you've got going. So that's one. Ginger is definitely one. I like to incorporate all of those spices basically into everything I eat. It's really easy to throw some cinnamon into something. Or, I mean, things like cumin and fennel, they're a little bit different. But what I would recommend for folks is to experiment. Experiment throwing like a half a teaspoon of powdered fennel. Fennel seed is the most beautiful thing ever. If you powder it, it's just, it's so yum. It has a bit of an aniseed flavor. Like a quarter teaspoon or half a teaspoon of fennel seed into a smoothie or into a shake or into a, even try putting it into your cookies or some other thing that you're cooking that might seem a little bit odd. So I would highly recommend folks to just experiment with some of these spices. That's the beauty of them. Because they're natural, we're not likely to overdose on them, or we're not likely to adversely impact ourselves unless we're taking whole cups. We're going nuts with it. And so we have that beauty in that space to experiment.
Beautiful. Can we speak I love using ginger on a frequent basis, and fortunately I have year-round access to it, and I think many places do. And I've gotten comfortable with finding different ways to explore how to extract it or use it, and I just love grating it up onto a board and then grabbing it in my hand and then just squeezing the juice into a drink or a warm water or something. And it's so simple and so easy, and it's so delicious and so empowering and enlivening. It definitely gives you that feeling of like,
yes,
I'm ready for the day, let's go. So maybe more effective than some other tonics that people might take in the morning. Can we speak a little bit to ginger's sister, brother, prince, queen, whatever, turmeric? Because turmeric is getting a lot of attention for its anti-inflammatory qualities, and a lot of people speak about how it should be combined with fat, or how it can be combined with pepper, and there's new science showing that it increases its bioavailability. But I hypothesize that in Ayurveda they've been doing coconut milk or raw milk with turmeric and pepper for a long time, right? And they already knew this.
Yes.
There's like this ancient knowing. What are some of the ways that you utilize turmeric from a healing perspective on a day-to-day basis? And do you use it just sometimes in water, or do you use it in hot water? And do you make teas or coconut milks or curries? Or tell me about turmeric and your interactions from an Ayurvedic perspective with it.
So turmeric, I'm so glad you brought turmeric up, because turmeric is the health and wellness industry's darling at the moment, and it has been for a while. And that is for really good reason. It's got lots of great qualities, as you mentioned. It's got a variety of terrific uses, and it's quite a powerful thing. From an Ayurvedic perspective, turmeric is hot, as you might imagine, or maybe not, I don't know. It has qualities that are hot, that are light, and that are rough. So when you think about something that's hot, light, and rough, if you just had a lot of it, you can imagine it drying you out, maybe. Because like if you just, if you I don't know, if you got a stick and it's rough and you just rub it and it's really hot, and there's some, it creates some sort of lightness. So it has this hot, light, and rough quality to it. But the challenge for a lot of folks these days is we're eating a lot of it. We're going crazy with it. And so if we can offset that roughness with something that's smooth, and something that's a little bit heavy, like fat, that means that it offsets some of the potential challenges that may come from having too much turmeric. I just wanted to give folks a little bit of Ayurvedic context for why we add the fat to it. And then also with the pepper has this beautiful. It's hot, obviously. We call it pungent. It's also light and has this expanding quality to it. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, pepper expands things. It expands it opens things up. So if you imagine having a peppery drink, all of a sudden maybe your nose starts running. So it opens things up, and when things are open, other things can come in a lot easier. And so that's part of the reason why we couple, just in that really simplified way. It does increase the bioavailability of these things, but that's from an Ayurvedic view. That's one of the ways it does it. So turmeric, how do we do it? How do we use it? I put turmeric in everything. I put it in tea. I put it in food. Turmeric, if you're not going crazy with it, it doesn't have a flavor that's too intrusive. So you can get the goodness of it, even if you're only putting like a quarter teaspoon in it or something like that. You can get the goodness of it and put it into just about anything. Soup is great to put turmeric into. Often I will put turmeric even in just rice if I'm making rice, and I'll just put turmeric in that. And it doesn't really strongly flavor that, but you can put turmeric in all kinds of things. As well, I use turmeric, and this is kind of throws me back to my days of studying in India. Turmeric is actually used in Ayurvedic surgery because it has these antibacterial qualities to it, and so it's actually used to seal wounds. And so sometimes if my kids have like blemishes or anything on their face, I go, no, don't touch it. Just get some turmeric and mix it with some honey. Like I'll get like a quarter teaspoon of turmeric. And put a drop of honey, mix that together, and then you can kind of put it on your face, and it does kind of help that hot roughness. Actually helps, but also antibacterial. Actually helps to dry out. Maybe if you've got blemishes on your face, turmeric is a really good skincare treatment. But also if you've got any issues, any scratches or abrasions or anything, turmeric's actually quite good for that as well. So turmeric's a beautiful one. You can put it in all kinds of things, and you get that goodness for the most part, no matter how you're using it.
Amazing. Beautiful. I love that. So encouraging people to use more turmeric in more ways. I mean, I'm a little bit like you. I try to use it as many places as possible now. I'm juicing it on the regular in the morning, or just grating it and squeezing it with my hand. Lovely. Into some fresh warm water with lemon juice, or I'm using it for curries and even salads, grated fresh on top, or with a dressing. So I want to speak a little bit more about digestion now, because turmeric and ginger was started with a digestion discussion. But I want to speak to some of the sort of imbalances that people might be experiencing from a digestive perspective. So some people come with, they might have leaky gut issues. Many people suffer from bloating or gas, or they just feel like they've got this extra belly happening. There's just some form of inflammation or bloating happening in the stomach. For some people, it might be not passing stool very efficiently, or just this irregular digestive sort of problems. What are some of the ways that Ayurveda categorizes or sees, or what are some of the ways you see different digestive disturbances, and some other ways that Ayurveda might rebalance the gut, not just from some of the healing spices you heard that stimulate digestion, but what are some of the other ways that Ayurveda sees digestion in the gut as well?
So Ayurveda, as I mentioned before, Ayurveda imagines digestion on all levels as a fire. And so we'll categorize digestive issues relative to the state of that fire, right? So you've got a fire that's low, that's almost out, making it very difficult for you to process what's going on or the food that you're eating. That's one that comes with it a whole set of symptoms around it, and those symptoms may be things like feeling foggy, or in the mind, feeling heaviness in the body. And interestingly enough, these symptoms are the ones that folks are most often experiencing, right? So they're elimination challenges, like things don't feel like they're moving through their bodies well. Things like not feeling joy, not feeling joyful, or not feeling enthusiasm, right? So there's a heaviness that's there. So that's one way of looking at it, and I'll talk a bit about how we deal with it. There's one way of looking at digestion. The other is that we have digestion, which is less common, that we have digestion that's too hot, and that can come from having a hot nature, or being in a place that's very hot for long periods of time, or in environments that are hot, or maybe having foods or diets that are kind of overly spicy. A lot of that can actually be related to genetic issues. And when that happens, then we end up with things like ulcers, and we end up with a lot of those we end up feeling hungry a lot because we're kind of burning through things a lot. That's less common. And then the other thing is that we have digestion that is variable. right? And when digestion is variable, that looks like a lot like IBS and things like that, where your elimination is one day it's one way and the next day it's another, or earlier in the day you had the runs and now you're constipated, or, you know, and in those times, that may, from a mental and emotional standpoint, you might feel anxious, fearful. You may feel just a bit disconnected. So it's important to understand that our digestion is connected to our mental and emotional experience in both ways. So mental and emotional affects digestion, and digestion affects mental and emotional. So when we're experiencing digestive issues, the first thing to try to do is to get to the bottom of it. And what that usually means from an Ayurvedic standpoint is that we take a break. We just kind of put the brakes on things a little. And that might mean that we simplify our diet right down. Right, so we start eating food that's really easy to digest, so that we can take that out of the picture. Like, we can get a sense if we're eating food that's easy to digest, and that might be things like simple, really, really simple soups with mung beans. Oh, lovely! I like mung beans. Really simple mung bean soups. Things like khichdi. We call that the Ayurvedic chicken soup, which is a very, very simple, complete protein meal that includes rice, basmati rice, and yellow mung beans, and some spices in there just to kind of help keep that fire kind of going, and maybe some vegetables in there. And you might have that for a day or two, or perhaps longer, just to calm the system. And then from there, you can actually start to look around, maybe in your other aspects of your life, to see what might actually be impacting my digestion. If I can take the food, variable out and simplify that right down. And then from there, you can start to kind of rebuild. You can start to kind of add other things back into your life or your diet. And that, it will really depend on what's happening in your life. But that impulse just to calm, even if it's a day, most people feel like, I don't have time to slow down. I don't have whatever. That impulse just to pull back just a little bit can give us a lot of information about what's going on, and it gives us the space to look and to to tune in to what's happening. Because again, these are all imbalances. They're the seeds of disease, and if we just keep pushing through, which is to these days, it feels like that's a really big issue, because most people you talk to are experiencing some kind of digestive upset, and they have for a very long time, and it's just become so normal that they just push through it. So I do invite folks just to take some time. And in Ayurveda, we build those times, those cleanses, we call them, even though they're a little less, they're not quite what you might consider a normal cleanse to be, the ones where you're having juice or things like that. Because they're a moment when we can, usually we do it in the spring and the autumn, they're a moment that you've built into your life when you can just be quiet. You can quiet everything. And you can listen. And that's important.
Beautiful. No, that's, it speaks to the idea of retreating. Yeah. Retreating from the world, going on retreat, or spending some time just taking some space. And, from a nutrition perspective, we encourage people to do that in a few different ways as well. Yeah. From a more balanced way, we encourage people to take some time and say, okay, let's just take out refined processed grains for a little bit. Let's take out some of the refined processed sugar.
Exactly.
Let's take out some of the things that might be challenging your digestion. Let's take out some of the really heavy foods, the fried foods, the too many animal products, and let's just pull that away for a little bit, and let's just center it on some more simple foods, but delicious, and let's give the body a break,
Exactly.
And oftentimes, just like we need a holiday, our digestion needs a little bit of a holiday, but typically people go on holiday and they double down on the buffet, and the extra alcohol and everything. And it's like, no, your body wants a break too, like your mind, it needs a break as well. And I think just speaking, maybe we can speak to this overlap a little bit just at the end here, Chara, because we've started to split out, courtesy of the modern reductionist scientific sum of parts thinking. We split out mind and body, and fortunately, a lot of work we've been doing, and a lot of great people have been doing, from mutual people we know, from Bruce Lipton to Dispenza to other experts, are sort of starting to bring it all back together to where it was, which is what yogic philosophy talks about. Yoga's always seen the mind and body as one. And the more we start to tune into calming the mind, or meditating, or visualization, or tapping, or all these sorts of mind-body sort of practices, or just being breath aware, it starts to have a really powerful physiological impact on the body. And what I feel is so interesting about our discussion today is that we're talking about two components together at the same time. We're talking about how food impacts the body and the feelings and emotions, and how you're saying if you're out there receiving all this information, like too much news or too many things, you need to retreat from that overwhelm of information or food that's coming into the body. So I really feel like Ayurveda is this beautiful sort of philosophy that embraces the mind body in such a deep way. Can you just speak to all the different ways that it overlaps, and how taking time to retreat, or like we sort of encourage like a 21-day period where people can just tidy up a little bit the diet and then maybe practice some mind body practices? What are the implications for people doing these types of practices on a reasonably frequent basis, let's hope?
Oh, such a good one. So juicy. So yes, there is definitely this beautiful overlap. And in fact, I had said at the outset that yoga and Ayurveda are considered sister sciences, and a lot of the things that we're hearing from beautiful experts like Bruce Lipton and Dispenza, et cetera, it speaks to this yoga, this greater philosophy, as you've touched on, which is that the mind and the body are really one. And so in terms of the sisterhood of yoga and Ayurveda, yoga is seen as the part that focuses on our mind. If you read the Yoga Sutras, I won't dive into that, but if you read into the Yoga Sutras, etc., it's like a handbook for mental health. It's amazing. And there's one mention of asana, but regardless, Ayurveda, it was developed. Ayurveda was developed and is focused on maintaining the body. So it's these two, and Ayurveda recognizes that the body is the mind. So the focus of Ayurveda is to ensure that you have a healthy vehicle so that you can continue your practice of discovering who you are. And so that's how these two things really, really work together. Ayurveda holds that there's a few different causes of disease. And two of the key ones are what it calls misuse of the intellect. That's one of them. Misuse of the intellect. What it actually means is that we are almost constantly making choices that are wrong for us. We know this. We stay up too late. We eat the wrong food. We live in the wrong places. Whatever it is, we do the wrong jobs. And so taking some time, whether that's these times that we build into our lives, or whether that's just a little bit every day or both, taking some time to begin to get to know ourselves outside of the messages and the noise from the outside world that's telling us almost constantly who we are, who we should be, what we should be doing. Taking time to really understand who we are is vital to the health, wellness, and longevity of this vehicle. Without this vehicle, we can't share whatever it is we're meant to share. We can't kind of live out our dharma. We can't, what we've done, what we're here to do. We can't do it. We actually do need this vehicle, and so our focus should be on really trying to maintain it as much as possible. But interestingly enough, it doesn't come natural to us. Because we come onto this mortal frame with all kinds of messages saying, this is, you got to stay alive. So you got to do this, or you got to do that, or you got to do this, you got to do that. And so because it doesn't come natural, we have to build it in. And when we building it in, from an Ayurvedic standpoint, it's exactly what you mentioned. It's taking time out, setting time out, either. In Ayurveda, we have a daily routine that's the foundation of maintaining our health and wellness on a daily basis, but also building in twice a year at least these extended periods where we can extract ourselves, where we can retreat, where we can integrate what we've experienced in the last 6 months, where we can let go of those things that aren't serving us anymore, where we can give our bodies the break that it needs in order to serve us really well, in order to shine over this next period. And that is really vital. And when we look out into the natural world, Ayurveda also holds that we are just another part of the natural world. We see this happening. Animals and plants, they hibernate. They have these moments where they kind of retreat from the natural world, and they rebuild their strength. But we just don't do that. We're in this man-made place. And so we really do have to choose it. And that's kind of that's another place that the mind kind of comes back into the picture. We have to value ourselves enough to make those hard choices, and knowing that those are the choices that are going to mean that we endure. And I think that's so important.
So beautiful. So well said.
Thanks.
And it's so naturally present when you start to observe nature or indigenous cultures, how this is built in. I mean, even if you look at animals, a horse or a cat or a dog, when they're sick, they go off the feed. They retreat. They go away. They run away. And they go hide 2 or 3 days, and they come back and they're, hey, you're better. What happened? What happened? There's this innate knowledge. Yeah. And we've become so of the mind, so of that prefrontal cortex, so intellectual, which has brought us so much incredible advancements as a society, and yet we're just one step out of the bush, so to speak, one step out of that space. And really, I really believe there's so much to be said about bridging ancient and future, and even a lot of technology that I think is going to drive humanity forward. And I remember David Wolf said this to me once in an interview in 2007. He goes, the future is going to be Stone Age technology, and I feel like it's true. Like a lot of what we're learning about what technology is going to drive humanity forward is about harvesting simple things like energy, sun, vibration, light, like simple ancient, we used to praise them as gods in a way, are coming back as these new abundant sort of energy sources. So really loved how this philosophy is so ancient and yet so practical and so ripe for our ability to digest it and integrate it, pardon the pun. Can we finish off a little bit on some of your approach to daily rituals? Because I'm really big on daily rituals, and I love helping train and support or give encouragement to and bringing different science to different rituals that people can do on a daily basis, from breath work or cold exposure to meditation to different types of tonics or herbs or spices that they're trying to integrate into little beverages in the morning or hydration rituals. What are some of your top approaches to that first part of the day from a mind and body perspective, from an Ayurvedic perspective in particular?
So I think first it's recognizing that daily rituals are vital. They're vital. If we just let the trash pile up, the rubbish pile up until we, and this is often the way that we approach things as human beings, right? We sort of run things into the ground until it gets so bad that we then have to do some massive thing. We have to undertake some massive action. Whereas if we just chip away a little bit every day, it means that we can just go on and living a better quality. And so I think that's part of the reason why daily routine is a really important part of Ayurveda. Ayurveda recognizes that it is the foundation of health and wellness. So for me, what's really important, kind of even outside of specifically what it might be, because it will change. And that's an important thing for us to understand, is that we change from, kind of day to day and season to season. It's something that wakes up and engages my mind. So for me, it may be, one of my favorite teachers says every morning and this is a common one, like this is one that pretty much stays throughout the year. When you wake up in the morning, take a moment just to remember who you are. Even if that's just close your eyes and ask yourself a simple question. What do I want today? Or who can I be today? Or what matters to me today or in this moment? These things are really, really important. They're setting a tone. Because I believe that part of the reason why we don't choose ourselves, right? One of those reasons for disease, according to Ayurveda, is that we don't value and love ourselves. And so every step we take in the direction of self-care is a message we're sending to the mind and body that we are loved, we are worthy of love, we are worthy of well-being. And so taking these moments in your day to care for yourself is really important. So setting your mind is really important. Tuning into the body is really important. So for me, that will often look like almost a micro yoga practice. It may be like doing, child's pose for 5 minutes, breathing, listening to the quality of the breath, feeling the breath in the body. For me, that early morning yoga practice, which may also be like a few cat-cows and maybe a down dog or something, that practice is about understanding, what am I working with today? What's happening in the body today? Is there pain? Like maybe I did a weights workout last week or something, and there's a bit of pain here or there, or maybe there's something, maybe I'm still hanging on to that conversation I had with so-and-so, or that good or bad news I got, yesterday or whatever. So it's just, it's tuning into what I'm working with. So it's tuning into the body. It's cleaning the car, getting those Cheetos out of the crevices of the back seat, or whatever it is. If you've got kids, there's always something. But it's tuning, it's cleaning the frame. So it may be, maybe scraping the tongue, and even things like scraping the tongue is a way of getting some information about what's going on in your body, because it'll change from day to day. Washing the face, having a good look into your own eyes, those usual practices for just physically just maintaining yourself. And then it's priming the digestion, as we've already talked about, which may be having some warm water. That could actually be a nice warming yoga practice. Something that's a little bit more dynamic, depending upon how I'm feeling in the day, or it may even be like having a little chew on a little piece of ginger or something like that. So it's kind of more categories than it is specifics. It's that mind part, tuning that in. It's that cleaning part. It's that tuning into what's happening in the body, and it's that digestive aspect.
Beautiful. Amazing. I love it. Chara, it's been so wonderful to talk with you about Ayurveda. I know that this could be a 12 to 26 part hour-long conversation discussion series, especially if we started to contemplate the different body types and the doshas and so forth. But, I'm so grateful that you've been able to help impart some of your wisdom today. And I love that my personal journey in nutrition and my personal journey in my life has kept bringing me back to ancient science. The more that I move forward in modern understanding, the more I look back, and I love that I'm being shown this in many ways in my life. So I'm grateful that I first got to meet you a number of years ago at a Wanderlust festival that we were talking at together and working at together, and that as soon as I thought about, hey, how do we bring more of this knowledge to the world, and I thought, let's do this, it'll be great. So I'm so grateful for your knowledge and wisdom that you've helped impart to the Food Matters community today. And I look forward to chatting again sometime in the future. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, James. And thanks for all you do. I think it's a really important message that you're bringing to the world, and a much needed one as well.